when I finished law school, it was immediately after the series L.A. Law had been on the air for a number of years. There was a big glut of law students. Everybody thought, "Wow, this is a sexy profession," especially entertainment law. And we all came out of law school thinking, "I'm going to get a great job working at a studio, or I'm going to be in a big firm, and I'm going to be making $250,000 a year in no time, and that kind of thing." And that just wasn't the reality.
This is the Art of Lawyering podcast, a show all about making more money, being a badass attorney, and loving your life. The Art of Lawyering is all about becoming the best you possible. Whether you are a law firm owner, an associate attorney, or somewhere in between, this podcast is built to help you get the most out of life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of the Art of Lawyering podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Small, and I am excited to introduce this week's episode. This episode has a lot to do with podcasting and lawyers who podcast. I'm not going to tell you exactly who it is. I'm going to save that for the actual interview, but it's a really good one. It's from a lawyer who obviously has a podcast. He talks about podcasting, and it's a really great episode. Excuse me. I want to apologize. As you just heard, I have a little bit of a cold, so hopefully you can understand what I'm saying, and actually I might have my nice deep radio voice for this week because I'm a little sick. So trying to get over it. I can't tell actually if I'm sick or if it's allergies or what, but spring is coming in, and I'm fired up about that. But with spring comes all those allergens, and I'm pretty stuffed up right now. But that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about what's going on this week. I'm in the middle of this book right now. It's called Success Principles by Jack Canfield. He's the guy that is best known for the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And this is an awesome book. I bought it on audiobook originally, and I then bought the actual book after I read it because I really wanted to dive into it. It's I don't know how many principles there are. I think there are probably like 40 maybe that he goes through, but it's a really great place to start to sort of lock in the bigger picture, the mindset things, the philosophical place that you want to be to really get the most out of your law firm and out of your life. So I'm really excited. I'm going through it step by step, implementing the implementing the lessons that or the principles that I haven't already sort of inserted into my life, and I'm really enjoying that book. So I'd encourage you guys to check it out. There'll be a link to that book in this week's show notes, theartoflawyering.com/17. You can find that 017 actually is what it's going to be. So it's theartoflawyering.com/017. We'll get you there. Okay. There's one other thing I wanted to mention here at the outset that I really want you to go check out, and I don't want you to miss it if you don't get all the way to the end of the podcast. But one of the cool things that happens this week is the guest, he critiques my Law Firm Confidential sales page. So, you've heard me talk about this tons of times. I have a membership site, and lawfirmconfidential.net is where you can go if you want information on that. That sort of lays out what it is, what's offered, what's cool about it, what's great about it, blah, 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 blah. And you can click there to sign up if you're interested. But this week's guest went and checked it out. And when we were talking before the show, he said that he had some critiques for me or some ideas to help make it better. And instead of getting that sort of off air, I said, hey, you know what? Let's just talk about it on the show, because it's a great lesson for everyone, because we all should be having these kind of pages that outline our services, that talk about benefits and features for our clients and potential clients, and try to get them to see what we're all about, trust us, and think enough of the service to sign up or call or whatever you want them to do. So as we talked about that, I promised him that I would update the page with his suggestions, because he had great suggestions, and that I would then write a blog post about what the page looked like before and what the page looked like after. And I'm sticking true to that. So if you want to see that blog post, you can go to theartoflawyering.com/sales page, and you can see the difference. Okay. And he gave some really great feedback, like I said, and the differences and the things that I incorporate into my new page are things that you can definitely take and apply to your own firm's sort of sales page, or your call to action page, or your landing page. I've been talking a lot about Google AdWords and things like that. If you have a Google ad out there, it shouldn't necessarily be pointing to your homepage. It should be pointing to a very specific call to action page that's very similar to what I have at lawfirmconfidential.net. So again, if you want to go check that out, it's theartoflawyering.com/sales page. I really encourage you to go check that out, and think about how you can incorporate those lessons into your own firm. Okay, so probably enough chit chat for now. Excuse me. I want to once again, thank you for listening. Encourage you, if you're interested, to go leave a review and subscribe at iTunes. You can also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Art of Lawyering. You can also go to facebook.com/theartoflawyering, and you can also email me, chris@theartoflawyering.com. So there's a whole bunch of different ways you can get in touch with me if you want. I'd encourage you to stop by and say hello and check in. I'd love to talk to you and learn more about you. And I think that's it for now. So without further ado, enjoy this week's interview. Cheers. Our guest today is an attorney whose practice is devoted to the representation of artists, writers, producers, and directors in the fields of theater, film, television, and music. He is also the producer and host of Entertainment Law Update, a podcast for artists and professionals in the entertainment industries. His practice also covers intellectual property, cyberspace, new media, and business corporate matters for clients in the entertainment industry. He is also the author of the podcast, blog, and new media producer's legal survival guide. But that's not all he does. Our guest is also the creator of the Law Podcasting Podcast, a show dedicated to featuring lawyers who podcast and teaching lawyers how easy and beneficial podcasting can be. And it's a great podcast, I know, because I've been on it. And I'm excited to talk to him about all of this today. I'm pleased to welcome to the show Gordon Firemark. Welcome, Gordon.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited really to talk about, well, people don't know. I kind of know what we're going to talk about, and you kind of know what we're going to talk about, but I'm excited to hear a specific part of it when we get to it. But okay. So I've given you a little bit of an introduction. What kind of fill the gaps in on your highlights.
My highlights. Wow. Well, so I've been practicing for about 22 years, since 1992 when I was licensed, and all of that time, essentially, I've been in the fields of entertainment. It's moved around a little bit, but these days it's live theater, independent film, television, and a little bit of music here and there, as well as all the other ancillary intellectual property and cyberspace-related stuff that we're sort of seeing all blending into entertainment law. I started my practice, I started out of law school. I took a job with a small litigation boutique doing entertainment-related litigation. Didn't last very long there, partly my personality and partly the firm wasn't a good fit, and went out on my own fairly quickly after law school. A short stint in a partnership for about 5 years in the middle, but I've been back out on my own now for about 10 years. Okay, great. And I know that I didn't say this actually in your intro, but you have your degree, I think, is in radio broadcasting or something like that, right? Your undergraduate degree? Radio, TV, and film. Yeah, I started college as a theater guy originally. That was my earliest passion, and pretty quickly moved around my major, jumped from one thing to another, briefly into journalism, briefly into photography and fine art, ended up in this radio, TV, and film major, and that was where my first exposure to law and legality came up, some government regulation of media and some policy courses that I took, and that's what led me to law school. Gosh darn it. Okay, well, hey, you never looked back, right, from that point on. Okay, so was it some coursework or something that kind of got you turned on to the idea of media law? I guess to summarize the whole field. Yeah, I'd never really thought about becoming a lawyer until my senior year in college when I was taking that government regulation of media course. And it was a graduate level course. I had sort of wrapped up all my stuff from my major because I was an enthusiastic guy.
Right.
So my senior year, I had some spare elective slots in my schedule. So I took the graduate level stuff. And surprise, surprise, I discovered an aptitude for it. Professor suggested I go to law school. I was thinking about going to film school at that point. And since I was doing applications and taking exams and things like that, I said, oh, what the heck, I'll take the LSAT and apply to some law schools. I did. I got in a few places, ended up deciding I didn't want to be in school for a while. So I came back to LA. I was in Oregon when I went to undergrad. Go Ducks. And, and came back to LA, worked in the television business briefly, just in time to encounter the writers' strike of 1988. And that basically put the business on hold and there were no jobs. So that was sort of my decision to go to law school, and I started law school in the fall of '88.
Okay. And when you went into law school, did you sort of know the whole time that you wanted to get into entertainment law?
I sort of viewed it as a stepping stone to a career as a producer, not really having thought through what the financial burden of student loan debt would do to me.
Right.
And, I would need to have that law salary as a way to pay back those loans. And, that's okay. I do some producing here and there, mostly in the theater area these days. But, the law practice was sort of by necessity. I hadn't really thought I would practice law for the next 25 years or whatever, but here I am, and
sure.
I like it.
Okay, and you're I think I'm gonna have a little bit more questions for you about your practice area and how you got into it, because it is one I think that is appealing to people from the outside looking in, but I and this is just me, I perceive some barriers to entry, maybe just because of the number of available clients or the amount of available work out there. How did you kind of break into, this area of the law? Particularly, I guess, well, I need to know a little more of your story, I guess, to really know. Did you mentioned you went and worked at a partnership for a little while after your first legal job or your first lawyer job. Was that an entertainment law kind of a place?
Yes. So I'm going to back into the question a little bit and explain that when I finished law school, it was immediately after the series LA Law had been on the air for a number of years. There was a big glut of law students. Everybody thought, wow, this is a sexy profession, especially entertainment law. And we all came out of law school thinking, I'm going to get a great job working at a studio, or I'm going to be in a big firm and I'm going to be making $250,000 a year in no time, and that kind of thing. And that just wasn't the reality. That we came into a recession, but also in particular a recession that was affecting the legal marketplace, and firms were laying lawyers off, studios were consolidating and laying people off also. So you're absolutely right. There are a number of barriers to entry, not the least of which is the market itself. But for me, coming from the background that I did with a degree in radio, TV, and film, and a job history in theater and television, I couldn't get a job working in a firm that did insurance defense because they knew what I was all about. They could see it on the resume. So that's why I ended up doing the litigation that I did, because it was entertainment related, and I was fortunate to land in that job. But litigation just wasn't for me. So I actually did a stint on my own for a few years after that, sort of the accidental solo kind of thing. Fortunately, I was able to build a small book of business that sort of kept me going. And then I partnered up with two other solos at the time who were, sort of in the similar areas. We all had different strengths, and we felt like it was it started to just be an office sharing arrangement, and then we realized, no, there was a symbiosis. So we formed a partnership and did that. And so I've been very fortunate to be doing the kind of work that I love my whole career.
Yeah, and what I'm curious about, and it's something I'd like to talk about here, is you mentioned you were able to build a book of business and do the same sort of business and networking and marketing fundamentals apply to your industry as
apply to, a DUI attorney? How did you how did you get your clients, right? I mean, let's say that
Okay.
I know there's somebody listening to the show that is interested in what you do for maybe for the same reasons that you had, and I'm just curious about how do you break into that industry? How do you find your clients, and how's that go?
Yeah. So I think, yes. I mean, the same networking skills and practices apply, only multiplied tenfold. This is the entertainment industry is that business where they talk about it's who you know.
Right.
And I think that's really true in any business, but in entertainment in particular, knowing that right influencer, that person that you're going to contact that is going to, shepherd you into a project or whatever it is. And in this case, being a lawyer, you need to know the people who are going to refer business your way, and they're the ones that need to, they need to know the people who are likely clients. As I hear myself saying it, I'm realizing it's true in any practice area.
Sure.
But networking, socializing, schmoozing is a huge part of how this business is done. I would say more so than in other practice areas, at least that's my perception. It's about going to parties and being visible and having those lunches and the breakfasts. I mean, it isn't unheard of for lawyers like me to be having, 2 breakfasts, a lunch, and a dinner out
Right.
with clients or prospects. And then, if you're in the music field, you hit the clubs at night. I mean, my early days in my practice, my hours were sort of, noon to 2 a.m. because I was going out every night to meet the bands and the songwriters and folks like that who live at night.
Right.
As my practice has shifted more toward film and TV, that is no longer necessary.
Sure.
And I'm able to be a little more of a daylight hours kind of a guy. But yeah, it's all about networking and meeting and FaceTime with people or connecting with people and having them come to know, like, and trust.
Can you tell me about any sort of specific interaction? It's not an interaction, sort of specific set of events that led to a client. You don't have to, obviously you don't have to talk about who the client was, but do you have any story that sort of rolls that into a real world example of something that you would have to do?
Sure. So I'll give you a couple different examples. One is, my childhood best friend, who is still my best friend, and we're producing partners in the theater area and stuff. But he is a professional musician and a very creative guy who's, in high demand for his particular talent. And he works with some very big name celebrities in their live performance and stuff like that. And he is my best advocate, my best referral source.
Right.
When I hung out my shingle on my own, I think he was one of my first clients, of course, and I had a lot of relationships with people from my work in both the television side as well as theater stuff even before college. Those relationships have all led to more relationships, and this particular friend, Bob, has been great, and he's referred me some very big name celebrities, household name kinds of people who've, in fairness, I think they sort of threw me a bone and gave me a little project here or a project there, and I got to prove myself. And when their big lawyers had conflicts in the early days, and that was a start. The other side of it has been me being visible and very public on the web and in podcasting and media, doing video and that kind of stuff. It has just led to people sort of, when they do a Google search, oh, this guy Firemark seems to know what he's doing, and I'll get a phone call, oftentimes from a manager or an agent, who says, my client needs help with XYZ, and that's sort of how that materializes. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. I mean, I was just curious about a specific example, and your friend is a great example of that.
You have to leverage your existing relationships when you're starting out.
Sure.
But it's also about making and nurturing new relationships as you move through life.
Right.
And, moving it up the ladder of the hierarchy of things, so you are getting to the kinds of clients you need to be getting.
Right. Yeah, and I have a follow-up question that's sort of along those lines, and I promise this will be the last question about this, but I'm sort of just internally curious about it, so I can't help but ask these questions.
As long as you all.
What if someone was starting let's say they want to break into the field. What are some of the types of work that lawyers could do to sort of break into the field? I would anticipate that you're not going to go in and negotiate a contract for Madonna or something. For people that are truly looking to break into the field, what are kind of some of the things that they can offer that will actually sort of get them in the door and maybe get them some work, or how can they do that? How can they jam their foot in the door there and get in?
Well, I'm going to start by saying I think one of the mistakes that I made early on and have continued making over the course of my career, now it's sort of shifting, but it was being too much of a generalist. Even within this specific niche of entertainment law, there are many sub-niches and even sub-niches of those that I could have exploited and jumped into, with full gusto and really sort of made a name for myself in one area. I've now done that in theater. There aren't very many folks who do live theater stuff, especially here in Los Angeles where I practice. And so, the old saying that the riches are in the niches, I think is really true. And that said, I think what you have to do when you're starting out is identify a niche that you think there's a real market. Identify that problem that you are going to solve for people, and it can be very narrow. Maybe it's representing I don't know, in my field, let's say it's filmmakers making first films budgeted under $500,000 or something like that, and they're going to need help with a raft of different kinds of things. Right. That you can offer as maybe a package of services, for a fixed fee maybe, or hourly or whatever, and just sort of make a name doing that thing. And then as those clients start to make bigger films and do other kinds of projects, with any luck and having done some good work for them, there will be some loyalty, and you'll go along with them for that. And that's sort of what I did, but it wasn't a calculated thing. So
that's great advice. That was perfect. I love that. And it's something that I think people don't realize, but you're right. The riches are in the niches. Because even for me, we don't really do a ton of criminal defense. We do DUI defense. We don't do a ton of personal injury. We do car accident litigation. So, and
there are lawyers that even take those niches narrower.
Oh yeah,
it might be commercial truck DUI defense, or
certainly, you're right.
Where really knowing a particular area of law really well, you can own a segment of the market if you do a narrow enough niche where there's an actual need.
Right. So let me follow up with another question about that, and this is sort of moving more towards the business owner mindset, I think, of all of this, more so than the lawyer side, but. So we let's say we know that that's true, right? We know that the riches are in the niches. Sure. How do you overcome just that blinding fear that you're never going to be able to find any clients, and that that you're not going to actually be able to establish that niche? Did you ever have that fear, and what did you do to sort of overcome it, if you did?
22, 23 years, I'll tell you when I figure it out, I'll let you know.
Right.
Fear is always there, and it's really what you do with that fear and how you use it that I think it leads to success. Fear is just your self-protection mechanism. Some people refer to it as the lizard brain or the resistance, Stephen Pressfield calls it. That is just trying to protect you against some perceived danger. And I think when you start to really analyze and ask yourself, okay, what is it I'm afraid of? Why? And what is it about that answer that I'm afraid of, and why? And keep drilling down, you start to realize that when you get to it, the consequences of whatever are pretty small. The other thing to remember is that just because you're marketing to a niche doesn't mean it's the only kind of work you're going to do. Let's face it, when you're starting out a practice, you're going to do whatever work it takes to make your living.
Right.
And, when I was starting out, I moved, my first office was in one of these executive suites, a Fijian suite, if you know the term, where there were a bunch of other lawyers all practicing small practices. And, I went around, I introduced myself to everybody, and I said, listen, you need a court appearance covered, I'm your guy. You need a brief written, I'm your guy, you know,
Right.
whatever. And I was doing all this contract work for these other lawyers, and that was enough to sort of keep a roof over my head while I built and developed my stuff. And, you know, I'll tell you, it was a great day when I was first able to say, no, can't do that, I'm too busy.
Right. That is a great day.
And I think if I had niched sooner and really let people, you know, the people don't want to send them their friends to a generalist.
Right.
You know, oh, your foot hurts, let me introduce you to this doctor. No, you send them to a foot doctor, right?
Right. Yep.
Same with a lawyer. And so sometimes they don't know, is this something you do or not? And so again, just being really narrow, at least in some of the marketing. And you know what? Pick 2 niches, pick 3 niches. If you feel like it's you know, you need to hedge, do a little more, but start with one, build up, grow a little bit, and get known for the particular thing that you do. And it's best if it's something you actually like doing.
Right. I agree. What's thinking back over your years of law firm ownership, what's a kind of a big challenge that you faced at some point, and what was that? Have you had any big, you know, does anything pop in your mind? And I'm talking about professionally mostly, you know, you ever have just something happen that rocked your world with your firm?
Well, I mean, yeah, I had a great client who died on me very suddenly.
Oh my God!
My business walked. You know, I mean, he was, you know, he was a pretty famous songwriter in his late 70s at the time, and we were doing some, I won't call it litigation, but it was dispute resolution, challenging some royalty statement, you know, stuff like that. And we had a sort of nice hunk of business every year. I was getting, you know, a fair piece of my earnings from this. And what I learned when he died was that I was too, what's the word? Too dependent on one client.
Right.
I guess. And, you know, I mean, it's easy to, it happens because all of a sudden that client's keeping you very busy and you don't market and you don't go out looking for more stuff. But, so that's one, I guess, piece of advice is never get too dependent on a particular client. And also plan for the unexpected. You know, let's face it, solo practice is a very up and down. You're going to have good months and bad months and maybe
Right.
even good quarters and bad quarters. You have to be able to ride out the rough times. And it's very hard to be optimistic and have faith that it's going to be okay. And so I, you know, say start planning for that by some savings. Keep your overhead as low as possible. You know, I think we're very fortunate. When I started out, you had to have a landline phone because cell phones were just coming into,
Right.
and it was colossally expensive to have a mobile phone. And you had to have an office and a place to meet with people. Nowadays, laptop and a mobile phone and a Starbucks, and you can be practicing law.
Right.
Particularly in the transactional space. You know? I sort of feel like my car is my primary office and my home is the secondary.
Right.
So, and I do maintain an office in town, but it's a virtual. So
Okay.
I only pay for what I use.
Right. Did you, when this client left you,
Yeah.
did you have a cash flow problem, or you know, did you experience any specific problems as a result of that? Or had you saved up? You know, I mean,
No, you know, that's my mistake. I had not saved up, and in fact, this happened with 2 clients in fairly short success, within 2 or 3 years of each other. And I hadn't learned from the first one. I hadn't been able to save enough from after the first one anyway. That I ended up having to live off some savings and some reserves that I did have. But yeah, it got real scary there for a while. And in fact, that's fairly close to the time when the partnership I was in was sort of dissolving, we were going our separate ways. It wasn't any big problem, and we're still all friendly. But and that's roughly when I said, okay, I'm taking it into a home office scenario. And you know, I wasn't really consciously deciding, I have to cut my overhead, but that's what sort of made it possible for me
Right.
to ride it up without having to go get a job working at Walmart or something.
Yep. And right. And I think it's funny that that is kind of one of the obstacles that you've had to overcome, because in this last week's podcast, which I think is episode 15, I talk about our own cash flow issues that we recently had, and and we didn't have anybody to leave us like you did. I just did some bad math, and I'll just tell it really quickly here because they can go to the other one to listen to it. But we would put people on payment plans for our DUIs and things like that in particular.
Yeah.
And what we did was we gave people too much time to pay, so that in receivables we have a very, very nice little chunk of change.
Yeah.
But month to month we were having a cash crunch, because we didn't have enough of those long-term payment plans built up to sustain our cash flow from month to month.
Yeah.
So we had like a 2-week period where I was sweating bullets, just scrambling, trying to, get some more clients and do whatever else we could to sort of, rustle up some cash.
And suddenly you're in the credit business. And
right.
I mean, you have to do it sometimes to make it possible for people to afford your services, but you also have to go into that with an understanding that a portion of that's going to be uncollectible, a portion of that's going to be slow pay, and a portion of that is going to be, just you never know. So you can't really use those receivables treat them as an asset.
Right. No, I'm looking out. I'm like, geez, over the next 6 months, we're going to collect $100,000, but I could really use like 10 right now, kind of a thing. It's like, I could use that right now.
And it really takes it out of the wind out of your sails and your ability to be an effective advocate when you're having to call up clients and say, hey, you're late on a payment, or hey, I need this money now, because frankly, you're admitting that there's a little bit of a problem, and,
right.
and it's embarrassing and demoralizing and all that, and you got to protect yourself against that by, frankly, my feeling is don't get in the business of extending credit to clients. In my practice, because so many of the clients are on this sort of spec roller coaster of script and somebody wants it and there's a little option money and but then we're going to wait 2 years and see if anybody's going to make this movie, and then if they make the movie we're going to get a big check. I have a similar situation where I do some of my work on a percentage of what they earn. And so it might be 3-4 years after I do the work before they earn that money, if they ever earn the money. And so, I've just dedicated that a percentage of my time and energy, I'm willing to do that as a gamble in favor,
right.
So that I have the big payoffs then.
Yep.
And some clients, just need that kind of help. So I don't know if there's an answer to the issue, but you have to, you got to watch it.
Yeah, it's important to at least understand that the issue exists and have a game plan for dealing with it, right?
And knowing what your monthly nut is, and
right.
having a plan for that allows you to do to extend that credit with the expectation that some of that's going to be slow pay. That becomes the gravy, as long as you have enough of the core business.
Right. And I can't tell you how much more. I've always been a proponent of sort of the lean business model, but even more so lately, I've been just kicking myself because we're in a lease. It's not long term or anything, but still, and it's not even so much as the expense, but I sometimes just see it as money that we could be putting in our own pockets. That we're just giving away for no reason.
Yeah.
So it stings twice for me.
Right. I hear you.
But whatever. That's the fun part of being the owner, right? You get to think about all these things and deal with all these things. So
absolutely, it
is fun. I wouldn't change it for anything. So okay, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about podcasting. All right. When did you get into podcasting? How were you sort of exposed to it? And what's the story behind that?
So my background, first of all, in the theater as a sound guy, and even starting in junior high school, I was always sort of familiar with microphones and mixers and sound equipment and stuff like that. So I've always sort of paid attention to this stuff anyway. And then this technology called podcasting started to come around, I want to say 2004, 2005-ish, somewhere around there. It became a thing that you could record and post something on the internet, and people could download it and listen to it with this thing called an iPod or mobile MP3 player, And I just noticed it. I didn't really do anything about it. And then I got a call. I've always been, like I said, my website, I've always been answering questions and trying to be a helpful resource for my clients. The way I choose to market is content marketing. Just be helpful, provide value, and count on people remembering and reciprocating when the time comes. So I had a call from this guy who was he had a podcast already that he was doing for videographers. And I don't remember what the show was called exactly, but he approached me about doing a Q&A session on his podcast. And that evolved into us doing it every other week, I think it was.
Okay.
And that became a show called the Law and Video Podcast that this guy, Brian, and I did. It was a Skype call, and he handled all the recording, and he would feed me the questions, and I would supply the answers, and we'd be done. And all of a sudden, hey, I was famous. I had a podcast, right? After a year or so of doing that, he decided that he wanted to do something else and just didn't want to spend the time and energy on it anymore. And I sort of felt that as a loss. And so it took me a while, but I came back to it. And I'd already invested in, a microphone and some connection gear and so on. So it was easy for me to, to dabble at it. And I guess it was around it's about 6 years ago now. It was early 2009. I had just had a baby in the house, and I was sort of trying to stay closer to home. And so I was looking for ways to market and promote and be visible without having to be out all the time. Right. And I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. And podcasting had grown over those few years into something that I was listening to shows. There was this guy, Leo Laporte, who does a tech show that I thought was great. And I sort of copied that format, and I got a co-host. I went on Twitter, which was very new at the time. And I asked around. I said, I need a co-host for an entertainment law podcast. Who do you think? And most of the people I was interacting with were lawyers. And 3 or 4 of them all suggested this gal, Tamara Bennett, who's in the Dallas area. And I had followed her, but I didn't know exactly what she was doing. We connected. We found that it was a good fit. Right. And we just decided to start doing it. And so we recorded our first episode in, I want to say, April of 2009. And we are recording episode 61. We do it once a month. Okay. Episode 61 is day after tomorrow. So here we are, 61 months later.
Right. That's incredible.
And consistency is great in podcasting, and you want to do it more often than that. But we do a monthly hour-long roundup of legal news stories, and there just isn't time in the day, or in the week, I should say, to get together every week and record an hour or even a half an hour show of this nature. We have a lot of prep to do. We have to read and brief and study cases and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, talk about that. So talk about who does what and what it takes to get ready for that podcast. What do you guys do?
So the first few episodes, she and I would just identify some stories, and each of us would write up a summary, and we'd share those back and forth, and okay, we'll do these stories, and bing, we're done. I realized pretty quickly that was going to be hard if either of us got busy in a given month, and we would end up delaying and not getting the show out. So I put out a call for some interns, and I think my first intern was a student at Boston University Law School, and pretty soon I developed a relationship with folks at Pepperdine Law here in LA, as well as my alma mater, Southwestern. And so every few months, I get a new crop of interns coming in, and there have been a bunch of lawsuits about what makes an intern and whether they're really interns.
Right.
In the entertainment industry. So I've taken to calling them volunteer contributors, to be very clear.
Right. That's funny.
So anyway, I've got a team of about 5 law students who are, identifying stories, and every week they just, as they read blogs and things like that, or they hear the news, they will tag those stories on a bookmarking site, delicious.com, and then once a week we get together on a group video chat on Google Plus Hangouts, and they sort of pitch me the stories, and I say, okay, we'll do that one. That one's not quite ripe yet, or whatever. And we will put together this list of 10 or so stories every month. So we'll do 2 or 3 a week that I'll pick, and those will become the rundown for the show. And then they go off and write the summaries, and Tamara and I will then review the summaries and work from that when we do our show.
Right. Okay.
So,
and who is your sort of ideal listener? People in the media industry?
Okay. No. Well, yes. So when we started the show, we were thinking we were talking to other lawyers, and I think that's who we are speaking to mostly.
Okay.
I'm not sure speaking to our competition is the best marketing thing in the world.
Right.
okay, I'm going to tell all the other lawyers to do the same kind of work I do. We were originally trying to monetize by doing offering CLE credit.
I see.
And we did that for the first few years without a lot of success selling the credit. So, anybody can listen for free if you want the credits. Sign up here, pay $20 a credit or whatever it was. And it just didn't work out great. And the cost of doing it and being certified in a bunch of states and things was just getting out of hand. So we decided to let that go. And I think our show has shifted a little bit in its tone to reach out to other professionals in the entertainment industry, like agents and managers and even filmmakers and musicians and composers. We have a broad base of listeners. Given that it's a fairly small niche kind of a show, we've got those few thousand downloads every month of people who are genuinely interested in what we're talking about. And
Right.
I do hear from people that it's something that they discovered on my website, clients and prospects, discovered on the website when they went looking for an entertainment lawyer and liked the sound of my voice, thought that I was very personable and would be someone they could talk to. And that's building that know, like, and trust thing.
Sure, I've had people do the same. I've had people just call me ready to hire me, and because that's what you get from a podcast that you don't get from a blog post. I think there's a different level of intimacy that's there.
And you're in an interesting, you and I have a sort of different. So my main show is called Entertainment Law Update.
Right.
You mentioned in the intro. There's this other one, Law Podcasting, which again is targeted at lawyers. Interestingly,
Right.
But the Entertainment Law Update, while not targeted at lay people in the entertainment industry, it's interesting enough and it's a sexy enough subject matter that people are interested. Let's face it, people aren't going to go listening and subscribing to a podcast about DUI law.
No, but what happens
Unless
is
they're having a DUI case.
right. But when they get to my website, they will see it, and that is when they listen, and then they say, okay, because there are a lot of for your industry may be a little bit different in the sense that people talk, I think, to each other about who to use and who they've worked with and things like that. When it comes to more consumer-based attorneys, I think people talk, but I still think that there's sort of an underlying distrust. Or I don't know if I'd call it distrust, but just sort of
Private nature. People are being private about their private stuff.
Yeah. So when they come to the site, it's just a way to sort of break the ice and let them hear who I am and see that I'm not some, I'm someone that can be trusted and that does have their best interests at heart and things like that. And I think they can tell by the way we talk and the questions that we answer, that we're talking to them.
They get to know you.
Right.
Without you getting to know them yet.
Right. And I guess that, and I consider you to be an authority on podcasting. So what for the people that are out there listening and considering doing a podcast, I think one of the things that gets in people's way is that this question that we're kind of talking about right now is, should I be talking to other lawyers? Should I be talking to potential clients? How would you suggest that people decide which way to go?
Okay. I think so. This is if you're talking about using a podcast as a marketing tool, and I think it's a very powerful marketing tool. It, like any marketing initiative, you have to start by identifying who your ideal client is, and it may be that, and frankly, how that client is likely to come to you. So if it's going to be a referral kind of a business, rather than somebody who's Googling a particular subject, it may be a different audience that you're speaking to with your podcast. So in your situation with DUI, you could probably talk about pretty much anything,
right?
and encounter people who are eventually going to need a DUI lawyer. But speaking to other lawyers, because everybody knows someone who knows a lawyer, and that's sort of how they find their lawyer when they need one, right? Who do you know? I have a problem. Do you handle this? No, but I know someone. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you might speak more toward a lawyer audience than somebody who is really looking for, I don't know, an accident attorney. You don't talk about accidents all the time to do a podcast like that. But if you're targeting, I don't know, let's say you're a motorcycle accident attorney. If you're targeting motorcyclists, you can talk about anything related to motorcycles.
Right.
Vintage motorcycles, touring on motorcycles, traveling with a motorcycle.
Yes.
You could have So you could really pick a podcast topic that isn't necessarily law oriented, but every once in a while you're going to weave that law stuff in. And of course, your show is sponsored by the law offices of
Exactly.
blah, 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 specializing
That's
in
the
it.
That's the Gary Vaynerchuk model, sort of. I don't know if you're familiar with that's what he's talked about a couple times, and I think
Jab, 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 right hook, isn't it?
that's right. I would agree with you 100% that is a fantastic way to do it.
You know, and if you're in an area of practice where there isn't a generalized interest in what's going on in the entertainment industry, for example, that makes it easier. I could do, and I have done a show targeted at executives and entertainment professionals where I just interview somebody about, you know, where the industry's going. And that is of general interest to people who may eventually need my services.
Right, definitely. Yeah. What okay, so we're not at time yet, but we're getting close. But I wanted to sort of do a little bit of just a list here real quick of, you know, let's say somebody's considering starting a podcast, a lawyer, and for marketing purposes, what are maybe, you know, the top 3 or 4 or 5 things that they need to think about or get right in starting out to make it as successful as possible?
Well, okay. I think the answer, the first couple of things are you have to know who you're talking to, because with any kind of marketing communication, again, the more laser focused you can be on having sort of that avatar of the person that you envision as your ideal client or your ideal referrer, if that's what you're going for. You got to know who that person is. And I mean, to the point of even having them, you know, knowing their hair color, their eye color, their name, you know, whether they're married, their social status, you know, all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
So that when you're talking, it's conversational. That's step one. Picking the topic that person is interested in is on my list. And then I think it comes down to, you know, do you get the equipment and the know-how of, you know, setting up the website for the show and all of that. And that's stuff that's, you know, pretty easily taught. And fortunately, unlike, you know, 10, 12 years ago when I was starting out doing podcasting, the barriers to entry on the equipment are nearly gone. You can get in for $50-$60 and you know, of the cost of a website, and that's pretty affordable these days. What other things are important? Well, consistency, having a regular sort of schedule, and getting the content out is sometimes challenging. You know, we're busy. Lawyers tend to be busier than many people, and we don't always control our own calendar too well. So a little pre-planning and having it scheduled in your appointment book that, you know, it's the third Wednesday of the month is the way Tamara and I do ours, except when we don't.
Right.
Or, you know, it's Sunday morning and my kids are at church, I'm going to do my show, you know, or whatever. I don't know.
Sure.
Whether people do that. But, you know, and just having a plan and maybe getting a few episodes in the can so you can ride out a week where you can't make it for some reason.
Right. What about, do you have thoughts on promotion? Do you, how do you get your kind of the message out there once you've created an episode? Are you active on social media and things like that, or what do you suggest?
So, I mean, I think everybody should. I mean, if you don't have an emailing list for your you know, subscribers to your blog and that kind of stuff, that's job number one. Before you do a podcast, before you do anything else, you want to have a list of prospects, leads, and so sending out an announcement to your leads that you, by the way, there's a new podcast episode. Here's what it's about. Click here to listen or download. That's huge. Social media, absolutely. My approach is I have a VA, a virtual assistant from the Philippines, who every week she loads up a buffer with a bunch of tweets and they go out over the course of the week. And we always make sure to include the most recent episode in there and that kind of stuff. I think that's big. Getting on Facebook, promoting it when you see somebody who's talking about something related, you can, you know, without being sleazy about it, you want to chime in and say, hey, you might be interested in this. That's another nice thing to do.
Right.
But I'm not a big believer in really using any of the tricks and tactics to promote a podcast. You know, there are ways to get your show into the new and noteworthy in iTunes, and then it's nice to do that. There are guys that, you know, put out I don't know, 10 episodes all at once, and then they get a bigger number of overall downloads because people are downloading a bunch at a time.
Right.
It's a trick. It's legit, but it's a little, I don't know, it's uncomfortable for me. There's this thing called Twitter bombing that is now everybody's becoming aware of this way to use Twitter to get lots of people to click on your podcast thing and play it, and then that counts as a download, and that, again, drives you.
What is it? What is Twitter bombing? I've never heard of it.
Well, I guess, and I haven't explored it too much, but you can put a link to essentially to the play button in a Twitter post, in a tweet. And when people click on it, it starts playing right away. And so every time it starts playing, that counts as a statistic.
That's sneaky.
And if you put the thing out 100 times in a night, you're going to get a certain number of clicks.
Right.
So.
Yep. Okay. And all right. So this kind of leads me perfectly into a little bit of a segue.
Sure.
And that is that, you are in the process of sort of putting together some tutorials on starting a podcast, right? And those are going to come out. It's going to be a free set of videos, right? Coming out in the next, I think.
Let's be really transparent about it.
Yeah. You tell me. You tell me what's going on.
So I have built a membership site and a course on how to podcast, specifically targeted for lawyers. It's at lawpodcasting.com, and it's a course that is just about ready to launch. And we're sort of, we've built the house, and we're putting in the switch plates and the socket covers and those kinds of things right now. It'll be ready within a few days of this show going live, is my expectation. But in order to get people thinking about this and to help people understand how, frankly, how marketing a law firm can work using modern media techniques, not just podcasting, but blogging and webinars and video and all of that stuff, I've created, or I'm in the midst of creating this 3-part video series that I think your listeners might be interested in. All they have to do is come over to lawpodcasting.com/theartoflawyering and sign up on the list. And then when these videos come out within a few days, you'll get notified. And at the end there is a pitch for my course. Right. But I think the material in these videos is valuable in and of itself. We're going to talk about how to use various media and effectively have a sort of a wheel that you cycle through to keep your marketing going in your practice in a way that doesn't chew up all your time and resources. We're going to talk about that ideal client and how to identify that person and sort of tailor your message there. And then we're going to launch the program with a big splash, I hope.
Right.
So, there we go.
All right, cool. So I would encourage everyone to go check it out. It's kind of similar to the way that I launch some of my things, and I know that I always try to make it so that even if you decide not to sign up at the end of the deal, that you're going to get a ton of great information in the free section that's going to help you out, and I know that yours is going to be the same way. So I would encourage people to go check it out anyway, if for no other reason than just to learn about this media in the way that you can use it to legitimately get new business, because it does work. So I want to encourage everybody to go check that out, and I'll give a plug for the URL once again. It's lawpodcasting.com/theartoflawyering, and so go check it out.
A spam thing. I'm going to send you a notification about these videos, and I hope you get value out of it.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Okay. So now for the part that I've been waiting for this whole time.
Oh.
So the I guess one of the things that you, and this I'm talking to I'm talking to the listener right now. One of the things that you may want to consider doing if you do start a podcast is having a call to action in there, maybe giving away something for free that people can go and check out to learn more about your practice area or whatever it is. And when you do that, you're going to send them to what we in the business refer to as a landing page. And I have a landing page right now for Law Firm Confidential, which is my membership site. That's at lawfirmconfidential.net. So I guess I would say, before we talk about what we're going to talk about, if you're listening and you're by a computer screen, maybe pull it up, okay? Because what I was speaking with Gordon kind of before we got started, and he sent me an email and he said, I checked out your landing page, and I have some suggestions or some ideas or some critiques or something. And I said, okay, and I don't know what these are. And we mentioned it before we came on sort of to record this. But what I told him was, I don't want to know what you have to say until we get on there, just so that, you know, I don't know, this is spontaneous. And I told him I don't care what he has to say, because if it's bad, because I'm interested in constructive criticism of any kind, and I haven't gotten a lot of feedback on this page in particular. So I'm interested in hearing what he has to say, and in particular because he uses some of these same techniques that I do. So I'm interested to see what he has to say. So with that sort of introduction, give me the rundown. What were your thoughts about the landing page, and what are your thoughts?
Okay, so I am on your mailing list, and that's why I got the announcement when you started this landing page,
right?
To get out for this Law Firm Confidential, which is a membership community and course of materials, I guess it is, on how to start and build a solo or small law firm.
Correct. Yes? Yep. Every quarter I release a new course on it. There's a private Facebook group. There's some other things, but but yes.
So my first comment is, I think it could be a little more explicit about that right at the beginning.
Okay.
I mean, it's implied from the subheading here: take your law firm from struggling to successful, and be a part of a kick-ass community. I love that, but I think it could just be you could just say Law Firm Confidential is a, and describe it in the way you feel is most appropriate.
Right.
The other thing about it is that you've got a video. I confess that I didn't watch the video through because I sort of knew where it was going.
Sure.
You've got a lot of features listed a few features listed in the orange segment of the thing, and the price right away, which is great. And then in the white section below, you've identified the struggle, the experience, what's inside, again, features rather than benefits. And
right.
That's so that, you know, you and I are both, we've studied internet marketing and marketing generally. And, you know, the feeling is that you sell the benefits, not the features.
Yep.
Or as one internet marketer talks about, you sell the destination, the vacation, not the airplane.
Right. You don't sell the drill, you sell the hole. Well,
yeah, exactly. So, hang on, I've got a thing chiming up on my screen. I just want to stop it before it distracts me and makes noise. So yeah, that's my main comment, is that this doesn't seem to describe very much about why I should join.
Right.
It tells me what I'm going to get, but not what result that's going to lead to. Okay. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to see a little more about, you know, first of all, is this something that's right for me, being in practice for 22 years?
Right.
You know, let me make that decision quickly. I like that you put the price right away, you know, sort of above the fold or near the fold.
Sure.
Although a lot of internet marketers would say, no, hide that until you've really sold them on the need for this thing.
Right.
But I'm not a big fan of that hide the ball approach. If $97 a month is too much for me, I'd rather not spend my time reading a whole long copy web page to find out that it's
certainly.
But yeah, I mean, I think you've got a great thing here, and I'd just like to see a little more about the result I'm going to achieve, the transformation that I'm going to get by being a member of this if I stay for 6 months or 12 months or something like that.
Right.
And probably a list of the titles of the courses that you've put in there or have planned.
Yep.
Might be really helpful there as well. That's something I'm interested in, you know.
Right.
So,
yep. All great feedback. All things I should do for sure. Yeah, that's great feedback. It's you know, and what I love about your feedback is that it is very specific. That's what I love, you know, because you ask people sometimes and they're like, oh yeah, you know, it's great. You know, I like it. It's like, well, no, think about it from the perspective of somebody that's going to be trying to buy this, you know.
Yeah.
Does it resonate with them? And by the way, this exactly what Gordon was saying is the way that you should try to look at your own landing pages that you're creating for your potential clients. So even when someone clicks on your site, you know, you want to have this same sort of tone and this same thought process in that what are your clients going to be getting, your potential clients?
Christopher, it goes further than that too. It's not just in your website. It's in every time you communicate anything about your services. When you're writing that engagement letter, write it in the sense of, when you pay us X dollars, here is what we're going to do for you. You're going to get this, either that you can't always guarantee a result, but we're going to accomplish, the steps toward that result that we're listing here below. A statement of work, a proposal to in an RFP, all of those things. You don't talk about, we went to school here and we have this many clients and we've been in practice for this many years. You talk about, this is your problem and here's how we can solve it for you.
Right. And before we go any further, I want to tell everybody that if you go to lawfirmconfidential.net now, by the time you listen to this, the page is going to be different. All right, because I will tweak it soon, but I will create a blog post that sort of shows the old version and compared to the new version, and I'll put that at theartoflawyering.com/sales page or something. And you can look at that, because nice. I will go change it, but before this goes live, I will change it because I just can't help myself. But I'll show the old version and the new version so you can see what he's talking about specifically with his comments, because I think they're great. And I think to see the example of sort of a not necessarily a bad example, but an example that needs work is good. All right.
And I will say, this is not a bad example at all. This is an example that got me thinking, okay, God, I really wonder what else I get.
Right.
But because I'm an internet marketing student, that's why I was wondering that. And I think if I was just looking for, okay, how can I improve my practice? I don't know that I would stop to ask those questions and wonder. Certainly probably wouldn't sign in to them yet. So
sure. Nope, I agree. And I think, look, if you're not always improving, then I think you're kind of falling behind. So I appreciate the feedback, and I'm going to work on it some more. Nice. Okay, so we're sort of at the hour, but I want to go. I have these lightning round questions that I want to ask you that are really brief. If you have maybe 5 more minutes.
Of course.
Okay. All right. So these are questions that I ask pretty much everyone. Take your time answering them, or answer them as quickly as you like. But here we go. Question number 1. Do you have a morning routine?
Yes, I have a morning routine that starts with usually one of my children waking me up.
Right.
It's interesting you asked that, because there's this book out there called Miracle Mornings. I don't know if you're familiar.
I have read it.
January 1st of this year, 2015, I started doing that. I started getting up incrementally a little bit earlier every day, to the point where I was getting up at 5, and that would give me an hour and a half or so of time to do a little exercise and meditation and stuff like that. And I did it for about a month, and then it fell apart because I got sick and I just wasn't getting out of bed that early.
Right.
And I've never gone back to it, and I keep saying I need to. Anyway, the morning routine is a little bit driven by the family's needs, and I don't actually get to my own stuff usually until about 9 in the morning.
Sure. I know the feeling. I have a similar story. I actually did wake up this morning and do my little morning routine, but it's been kind of inconsistent. But kids do that to you, I think, in particular. What's the best advice you've ever received?
I think it's the advice I got. Well, I didn't get it directly from Seth Godin, but he wrote, just ship it.
Yep.
Get your stuff out there. Don't hesitate.
Great. What is something that's working for you right now?
This internet marketing stuff.
Agree. What is okay? You can only recommend one book to someone. What book would you recommend? And this is sort of law firm business owner is the person that's asking you for the recommendation. So it can still be any book, but just keep that person in mind.
Work the System.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of the author off the top of my head, but it really talks about having systems and the value of anything that's a repeated task, having a protocol for doing it so that it gets done right every time.
Right. That's great. Great advice too, even if you don't read the book. Tell us about the one habit you've had that's helped you achieve success.
The habit of persistence and showing up.
Okay. Great. Yeah. What is the one question I didn't ask you that I should have?
Oh my gosh.
That's a tough one.
Yes.
If there is one, maybe there's not. Maybe I did a good job, and I know I didn't tell you about that beforehand, so it can be tough.
It is a hard one. If I had, okay, here's a good question. If I only had $500 to spend on my marketing as I'm starting, let's say $500 a month or less, what would I do with it? And I think the answer is invest in a website and an emailing service provider, and I think I would get the gear and start a podcast while I'm still not so busy that I can develop the routine and learn what needs to happen so that it becomes a habit.
Right. Perfect. Okay. And then finally, one parting piece of advice, and then any contact information that you want to give out to people if they have follow-up questions. Obviously, we'll give the URL again, so if they're interested in checking out your course and your free videos, they can do that.
One follow-up piece of advice. I would say it's be bold, be brave, and get started.
Perfect. How can we get in touch with you?
My firm website is at firemark.com. You can email me, gfiremark@firemark.com. On most social media, you can find me as gfiremark. That's Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff. And check in and download and subscribe to my podcasts, Entertainment Law Update and the Law Podcasting podcast.
Right. And once again, if you want to go check out those resources that he's going to have and check out his membership site, you can go to lawpodcasting.com/the art of lawyering. And I would encourage you to do that. So that sort of wraps up the show. Gordon, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And you had great advice and great insights and everything. So I really do appreciate your time. And thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Lawyering podcast. For more great action-packed advice and information, visit theartoflawyering.com.